Welcome to the Visual Storytelling Podcast. My name is Fred Ranger, and I'm so happy that you're joining us today for another inspirational conversation. Today, I have a friend with me, somebody that I like to chat with, I would say almost every week. His name is John Hendrick. He's a published photographer. He's been featured in the Avenue magazine, featured on Capture One, Leica UK, Document magazine, and so on and so forth. He's a talented photographer, and he's somebody with a story. And that's why I wanted to have him back, because his story has evolved over the last time we've spoke. So John, first, welcome to the show again.
Hey, thanks for having me again. Good to talk again. Always, I know we try to interact via social media, but it's always good to see your face and actually talk. So,
Absolutely.
on the podcast or off, either way would have been nice.
Yes,
So.
and we haven't fulfilled one of our promises to meet somewhere in the world at some point, but we will
this
fix
year.
that. The 2025. 2025 is the year. Cool. So John, first off, I want you to walk us through a bit of your journey. And since you've already been on the podcast, most of the people know you as that photographer who likes to capture the street with his Leica camera. But you've done so many things over the past year, and you've invested time, effort, and energy into, I don't want to say reinvent yourself, but really find your focus, and pun intended, and find your true passion and tap into it. So can you walk us through how did it all begin?
Yeah, I think what happened was, just to recap, I was in the military, got out, and then I was going all in on photography. But I think I was kind of freestyling it for the first year or two. And that's in the time frame that we got together and we're on, some other stuff. And then I was on your podcast. But at some point, I would say late last year, I was I really wanted to sit down and really formulate a game plan, right? I wanted to see what can I do if I truly set expectations, goals, timelines, and really held myself to some kind of standard or something. And it was more because I was just the 2 years were great. I think everybody should kind of invest as much time as you can to shoot. It helped me hone my skills, get better at the craft and stuff. But I think because I was able to do it 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7, 8 hours at a time, I made up a lot of ground, right? In 2 years, I shot where normal people would shoot maybe 3 or 4 years, right? Because I'm shooting every day. And I came to the realization that I need to this, right? Your podcast, storytelling, right?
Yeah.
More of long-term projects. What am I trying to say? What is my point of view? And I think that's where what you alluded to, which was rebranding and kind of looking at my own work and looking how I want people to accept my work or see my work. So
What you're telling me, John, is really resonating with me, because I kind of went through a similar kind of aha moment of hey, I'm making all these images that have nothing to do with a body of work. They're just random images. They're nice images. They're getting a lot of likes on Instagram, which I'm starting to invest less and less time on. But why am I doing this? I guess it's you have to how Simon Sinek said it, but start with why, right? So why are we doing it? And what you're saying is that if you tap into something that you're passionate about, if you invest the time and effort, and if you build on your craft and you start to tell a cohesive story, this is when it starts to make sense as an artist, as a creator, as a visual storyteller. So I don't know if you're like me, but I only recently, and I'm turning 45 on March 15th, so I'm a bit I don't know if I'm older or younger than you. You look
I'm about
always
to
so
turn
young.
50, brother.
Oh my goodness, I want to look half as good as you when I'm 50. But only very recently can I say that I know why I get up with that camera in my hand and why I want to continue doing it. So I don't know if you're the same on your side.
Same, exactly the same. And this year, the beginning of January, I didn't post a lot because I spent that month redoing my website, really going through the archives. And I used to have, and I'm sure other people can relate. I had the website and I had what I quote unquote call the portfolio section. And it was really just nice pictures categorized in some fashion. But now I'm kind of like going back, extracting images that I think can fall into one story. So I don't know if this will help anybody, but I was like, I have so much work and I didn't want the work to go to waste. So I was thinking, okay, like, where am I coming from? Like, what's my, each of us personally have our own, our own experiences and everything we've been through. And that kind of, I think, is the storyline and the origin of what you are trying to convey in some fashion. So I was like looking at all that stuff. And I said, in the work, something has to be in there, right? Like some of that has to like come out some fashion. So I found a couple of images and then I kind of was like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I was kind of like, okay, let's use Chat GPT, right? Like, okay, this is kind of my ideas, and I just threw out some ideas and some pictures that I had and see if it can give me to help me, right? Like back in the day, you had curators, you have people that can, help you put together bodies of work and decipher like a bio or some kind of subject title or line. And that's kind of what I use ChatGPT for to help me formulate and narrow down that focus so that I can be like, okay, this is the story. This is kind of what my brain is trying to convey in a well articulated way. And now I'm just going to kind of let the photos that resonate with that kind of fall into place.
Yeah, man, that's such a good use of AI in photography, not replacing anything, but adding and augmenting, your capacity to deliver cohesive work and work that resonate. John, you've also invested in your basically developing your skills. I want you to talk to us about the importance of workshops, and you've had the very good privilege to work with one of the best in the business, somebody who's been on the podcast, Mr. Phil Penman himself, and he's
Mm.
kind of giving you some advice here and there. So, how important was that relationship that you've built with somebody who's put in the 10,000 hours before us?
Yeah. F- Phil just put out a thing on Threads, and it was like, he was like, what's the best advice you've gotten from a mentor, a professor, or something like that? And he gave his that he got from one of his teachers. And then people jumped on there and were writing it. And then for like a day or two, I was thinking about it. I was like, I've been I've been a proponent of workshops forever from like the beginning, right? I've been with just to name a few, like JML, right? Ruben Radding. Like I've just really invested, like you said, it's like, okay, these are the guys I like. I like the way they either think or they shoot or where they're going. I'm gonna spend some time with them. Whatever that means, I'm gonna spend some time with them and kind of pick their brain or maybe help them, maybe have them look at my work. I don't know. Each one was its own thing. But with Phil, it's kind of what I threw on the threads comment was nothing beats like experience or time in the field or something to that effect, right?
Mm.
Which means, like you really have to like engulf yourself in it, right? And yes, so with Phil, I did a bespoke workshop. I was probably I don't even want to say that, but I did one with him. Now it's about 2 years ago. And it was almost a full year because we would meet back up like every 2 months or so. So we would talk for like 2 hours or however long he had this thing set up, give me a project, give me a couple of months to run with it, come back, talk, whatever. And I think that's how we built our initial relationship. And then recently I was in Tokyo with him for another one. And I was there with our friend Ricky for the LSPC.
Hi,
Um,
Ricky.
yeah, shout out to Ricky.
Yep.
And that was just another, like, it really cemented the idea that you need to be with these people, right? So, like,
Mm.
even though I spent a year virtually with Phil, being like physically watching someone shoot that you kind of admire or praise is is a whole nother aspect of this mentorship workshop thing. Because a lot of the students will like look for time with him, right? So they'll shoot and then be like, hey, he'll go over to them and kind of work and tweak them. I didn't really do that. And mainly because I had shot with, I mean, I felt like I've shot with him for so long, right? He has already tweaked all my images. What I did was I just watched, like I would just watch him shoot because what he does is, the afternoon we have an editing session. And it's really like, yeah, you edit your work and stuff, but it's really an opportunity to see him behind the scenes, pull up his shots from the day, how he selects, a little fine tuning of editing of like a quick edit, then how he sets his carousel, like all the BTS, true BTS, right? And what I would do is I would watch him shoot during the day. And then when we would go to the editing session, I was already, you get like a 2 hour block. So I would already like collate, I'll do all my images. So I wasn't doing it in the room. And I would just sit there and I would just watch because he puts everything on the big screen. And I would just watch and I'd be like, oh, that's the shot, because I was watching him take the shots.
Yeah.
Now I get to see the shots,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I know it sounds silly, but those two moments of like watching someone shoot and you know what they're shooting, but then to see the final image, it's just like, oh, like, okay, like, uh, like it makes sense, like, and to see someone, because you always hear one camera, one lens or whatever, and Phil's always hammered to me, like, you take everything, you know what I mean? Two
Yeah.
bodies, all
Yeah.
the lenses you got, whatever. And to see the body of work from a full day of shooting with like 35 steel rim, 75 knock lux, 50s, 24, like, he's in and out of lenses all day.
Mm.
And the work like shows that, but it's so dynamic because it's so many different angles and so many different perspectives, right? That it's really like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I really need to invest a little bit more on a couple of items.
Yeah.
And it's just that was my biggest takeaway, I would say.
Well, John, I mean, this is again so important that this part of the conversation. You won't really learn that on Insta. I'm sorry for all those Instagram fans, and as much as I love YouTube, I'm on YouTube. You're on YouTube. We all love YouTube. We watch YouTube. We actually produce videos for YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing like being with the person, seeing him move, seeing him connect with people, or connect with a scene, or connect with his own emotions. I'm sure you saw some of that because, yes, the technique and all these great things you can learn online or offline, but how he behaves on the show, how he captures the story, and why, I'm going back to that why point,
yeah,
why
sure.
he does press that shutter, and why does he put that 24 mil lens on. It's to tell the story he wants to tell. So, and how he processes it afterwards. The whole thing, I'm sure, brought you so much more value than anything you've seen again on YouTube and online. It's not to remove anything from online courses.
For sure.
I think there's a place and there's a purpose for it. But again, human connections, that's what we're capturing, human connections. So might as well learn from those human connections and how people behave on the streets. So I thought it was very important what you said just there.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it enough, right? Like, whoever it is, in this situation, it's Phil, but whoever it is that you admire, I'm sure they have a workshop of some sort, and like, just do it.
Can I get Joel Moritz?
And,
can I get Joel Moritz to just spend
hey, I don't know, maybe
7 minutes? All I need is 7 minutes with Joel. That's all I'm asking.
maybe he's very responsive on IG. So maybe.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I did reach out and we had a couple exchanges. His schedule is crazy, but I'm still working on getting him in on the podcast. So maybe there's a connection there. In the meantime, I will buy the bespoke workshop from John Hendrick. I think it's a good one. In the meantime.
Oh, Pat, yeah, right, yeah. I think my class or what I offer, and like, sometimes it's kind of weird, right? Because I am attending a lot of workshops, and then sometimes you think, well, if this guy's attending, like, why is he teaching, right? I think there's a connection, but it can be seen certain ways, right? You have to thread carefully with that. But I think the beauty of my workshop is kind of like what you said with YouTube, is there's a time and place for all of it, right? And mine is very good for my students, right? Because I teach over here at the university, and I teach like photo 101, and it's kind of like a subset of the school. It's more like a adult learning community kind of, but it does belong to UTSA. And I get all ages, but they don't offer a secondary course. So for me, doing what I did was kind of smart in the sense that like I spent 8 weeks with these guys. There isn't a supplementary course. So it just makes sense for them to get with me because I already know what they're shooting. I'm kind of know where they're at.
Yeah.
And it's a good place for them to kind of like continue if they really want to dive into it. It's a good place for me to kind of like hone in on my like teaching skills, right? And a lot of that stuff is the outdoor stuff, right? So
Yeah.
Phil's workshop also works for me to kind of see how to navigate that world, right? Having 8 people with you out in the field and how do you go about it, right?
And
I
by the
think one
way,
of the best things he says at his workshop is like from right from the beginning is like, I'm not gonna follow you and tell you what to shoot.
yeah.
He's like, my job isn't to make 1,000 other Phil Pinmans, right? He's like, so don't expect me to go over there and be like, come over here. He does it. He does. If there's a cool shot, he'll bring people over to kind of shoot. But his goal is just to fine tune how you see the images and how you shoot, which is really cool. I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, it has to be, and I think you say on your website, a journey captured through your lens, or you say through
Yeah,
my
yeah.
lens, right? So that's
Mm.
it's figuratively and literally, like through your choice of
Yeah.
lens, but also your choice of lens in life. Like, what
Yeah.
story do you want to tell? How do you want to tell it? Phil decided that black and white, although he does shoot film, not film, but yeah, he does shoot film, but he shoots a color also. But most of his work is in black and white because that represents how he wants to communicate, how he wants to tell his stories, and his work is stunning. I think I'm going to put some links because we've been talking about him for so much. But
Yeah,
your
for sure.
workshop, to your point, it's at the right place at the right time for a certain amount of people, and then maybe they do go see Phil or somebody like Phil, a master of photography, because they want to a different type of experience. So I completely agree with you, and it's very smart, as you mentioned, that you were able to take all the learnings from when you attend workshops, plus
Yeah.
your superpower, which is being very good at communicating and teaching, putting that together and offering it to the right target. And this is my marketing
Yeah.
side talking, but I think it was very clever for
Yeah,
you to do
yeah,
that.
for sure. I mean, you gotta love, I mean, you don't have to, but my concept is like you I kind of love the craft for all of it.
Yeah.
All right. It's not just going out there and shooting. I love all of it. I like the shooting. I'm very bad at like coming home and like sitting down and editing, but once I do, I love the editing process.
Hmm.
I love design. So I love like laying out stuff. And then I'm a people person. I get energy from being around people.
Yeah.
And if it means I'm teaching and that's how I'm around people, I don't mind teaching it either, right? Like so it's all of it for me. It's all of it.
I think you and I have a lot of similarities. So and somebody told me once, like, what's the difference between an introvert and an extrovert? And I know we can be both, and it depends, but I think the best explanation was the introvert starts the day with the gas tank full, and then as they meet people, it gets emptier and emptier and emptier. You and
Yeah.
I are as extrovert, quote unquote. Again, we can be both, but as extrovert, we start the day with the tank empty, and as we meet people, it gets full and full and
Yeah,
full and
for
fuller. So
sure.
it's a great way of describing it. And again, you gotta tap into your forces and to your abilities, and that's something that you do very well. I also think that if you are an introvert, there's something you can bring in the way you tell your story that's very different than somebody who's a bit out there who's a people person and so on and so forth. There's a place. This is the beauty of photography, and I like the fact that you said you love all of it, every
Mhm.
single aspect of it, because there's a place for everybody in it, and that's kind of why I started sharing more online in terms of the podcast and the YouTube channel,
Uh-huh.
having conversations with inspiring people like you, because I want more people to listen to that and say, it's not just about picking up a camera and making a photo.
Yeah.
It can be more than that. I mean, for me, I even have an
I mean, there's
episode.
master editors,
Yeah,
right? There's people that just edit photos.
exactly. It's such a creative space, and it's such a wonderful space. It's a tough space too if you're trying to make a business out of it. And we've
sure.
addressed that topic in other episodes, but it's a tough world too. But if you're willing to put in the work, as you mentioned, it is possible to be around or in the photography space. in various ways. And I think
Yeah.
you and I will agree that it's no longer just one way of doing it. Like, oh, I'm a wedding photographer. I shoot weddings and I
No.
deliver weddings. Just look at what Kevin Mullins is doing right now. He went from being a super successful wedding photographer to an online quote unquote teacher and preset sellers and so on and so forth. And he's doing a great job at it. So again, you can still be in the world of photography without having to be 100% of the time a photographer. That's what I like
Yeah.
about it too.
Another golden nugget out there is when I did my thing with Phil, he was like, "Oh, I like your high, like my very simplistic, abstract, high contrast, colory images." He was like, "I those are the images I would see in a house." He's like, like it's harder to have for someone to buy a picture of a guy standing in the street and put
Yeah.
it in your house, unless your house is very modern, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But like having a Rothko looking photograph, right? Block colors. People will probably do that in their homes.
Yep.
And he told me, so I have a better shot at selling those images. And then we started talking about LinkedIn. So what I did was I met like an architect here and she was like drawing some stuff. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, I don't do the drawings for the architectural plans, but I do the layouts. So like if a building's going up, how many desks, how many chairs, where are they going to be, whatever. And I was like, how about artwork or stuff on the wall? She's like, oh yeah, that too. So then I kind of intersected that, which isn't something people would think about.
Yeah.
So instead of selling prints and being in galleries, which I would love, and my aspirations to be in the MoMA, but I mean, these big banks and corporate buildings have a big budget to spend, and if you sell a print that can go in the lobby or in an office, like they're not going to buy one,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
they're filling out the room.
Absolutely.
So like, there's that too. There's
I
so many ways. There's so many ways. You just gotta really like, if you really want it, you just gotta sit down and figure it out.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
So Phil, tell me. I said Phil. My God, we're speaking so much about Phil that I'm now starting calling. You're gonna be Phil Hendrick
So
for the
funny.
rest of the podcast. John, my friend
Yes,
John.
it's okay.
Yes, and we say
There's
hi
worse
to.
people you could call
Yeah,
me.
exactly. We say hi to Phil. Phil, I think you need to be back on the show. That's a sign. But yeah, so John, so tell me about that one image in 2024 or early 2025. If you've shot one image that you're like, wow, okay, all of my learnings, everything that I've been trying to do, and if there's none, then there's none. But if there's one image that you shot that you're like, this is the direction I want to be going into, and this is a photo that represents my art in this very day and age.
Okay, it would be one of these Japan images,
Okay.
and if people go to my Instagram,
Yep.
it's gonna be,
I'm gonna put the links down below for your Instagram, so
yeah,
it's gonna
it's
be
gonna
easier.
be like the first full image before the Tokyo grid starts. And it'll make sense if people look at it.
Yep. Yep.
It's a carousel of 5 images. It's actually the 5 images I submitted to the Leica M campaign.
Nice.
And any one of those, but I think it's the third one where I shot it in front of Uniqlo and a girl was picking some flowers because they had like this little flower boutique right in front of Uniqlo.
Yes.
And it was midday. The sun was coming down the road, just like a narrow alleyway road, kind of. Not really, but it seems like it.
Mm.
And I had just bought the thread mount, the 50 millimeter thread mount, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's very old. It's got like no coating. So it's got like a really specific glow. And
Mm.
it just suited the moment right. And what I think I like about the image is with that series or that day when I was shooting, I don't even remember what day it was, like Phil was like, "Oh, you got a look. Like you already have a look." You know what I mean? And that's like a lot for me, from a guy that I've been working with forever, to tell me that like you kind of already found your place.
Yeah.
So that was encouraging, right? It's like, okay, this is how I'm going to shoot. This is kind of like what I like to shoot instinctively.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the shot that is kind of like
Dude, it's a
sticking to
beautiful
me.
series. I'm looking at the image. I mean, again, I'm gonna put the links down below. The way everything is like soft focus, but then the focus is on her without being overly sharp, and the treatment of the color. Dude, this is a brilliant image. My favorite
Yeah.
one, I think, is
Even
this.
the next one with
Yeah.
the girl that's really close to me, that's
Yeah,
kind of cool
yeah.
too.
So okay, so this is the gear part of the show. There's always a small conversation
There's
about
always a little
it.
part we gotta geek out on. Go ahead.
We have to, because this lens seems very unique. So this was your first time shooting it?
Yeah, but it's a 50.
Okay, so
I
you're
shoot
used
50,
to the,
so
yeah, yeah.
I'm used to the composition and the look, right?
Is it a 1.8, a 1.4? Like what's the
1.5.
1.5? And this is from the
Yeah.
50s or 60s? What's
Yeah,
the okay?
it's a thread mount. So it's
Okay, okay,
like a
okay. So
thread
you have
mount.
the screw, but then you have the M
I have
adapter.
the
Yeah.
adapter, yeah. Yeah.
And that was shot on the 61 megapixel sensor of the M11.
No,
No?
I had the 240
Oh, you had a
at the time.
240. Okay, okay, okay.
Mhm.
Got it. I love it. I love it. So speaking of gear, this was shot on the 240. You and I have made some purchases in the past
Oh,
year.
yes.
You more recently with
Yes.
a another Leica camera, and I will
Always.
always always Leica camera. I mean, we've been blessed enough to use those cameras, and there's always gonna be haters down there. But if you
Oh,
held
for
or
sure.
if you hold like a camera in your hand, especially the M series, you'll understand what John and I are talking about.
Yeah.
But you and I talked about the fact that we didn't need to upgrade. We were okay with our M10s and our M240. And today, my friend, you and I have an M11. You have the
M11.
M11P. I have the M11. What happened?
I like to joke that I just got it for the internal storage because I forget my
I,
card so much.
I needed a 256 gigabyte card, and there was this
Yeah.
M11
I need
available.
256 internal storage because I forget my card. We kind of alluded to it earlier. When I was in the workshop, there was a conversational piece where it was like, it's time for, shooting the M240, 240p, which is a great camera. I suggest anybody buy it. The sensor on that, the color science on that 240p specifically, because, I've had like every iteration
Yep.
of the 240 is really amazing. But in Japan, we were shooting like at 4:30 in the morning to like 9 o'clock at night. And because I usually don't shoot in those time frames. I usually just shoot from like after I drop off my daughter to school till I have to pick her up. So I'm shooting midday, right? But shooting early morning and late night, I was realizing that what I wanted to do creatively was being held back a little bit by the camera, right? Not to say that the camera isn't capable, but I felt like, and I know it sounds cliche, but I've kind of outgrew it, right? the 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 ISO of 200, base ISO 200
Yep.
was just not enough for me, right?
The
Um,
highlights.
yeah, there's just limitations, but it's a great camera. I'm not going to downplay it, but for the time frames that I was shooting and where I was going towards, I just realized I needed more. And the M10 was going to truly be it.
Hmm.
But when I came back to the States, I sat down and I was like, okay, like I, let me just go all in. So, right now, currently the M11P is their top of the line M.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, if I ran the 240 from, that camera came out in 2014, so basically 10 years and it was
Hmm.
still good. If I get the latest camera now, I'm probably good for another 10 years.
Hopefully.
Right? So hopefully I would
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
So I just was thinking longevity. Like, okay, let me get what they're dealing with now, and I'll just, you know, start from there and see what happens. So that's ultimately why I got it.
So
It's
so
hard
so
to explain to people that
yeah.
don't know the camera because they see the other one, they see this one, they're just like, like what's so great about the new one, right? And
Yeah.
unless you start geeking out with like the base ISO 64 and the, high megapixel, all this other nonsense, essentially it's the same camera, right?
Do you shoot it at 61 megapixel?
At 64, I shoot at 64.
64. Oh, say at 64. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I change it sometimes because the files are massive. So depending on
Oh,
what
I
I'm
mean,
shooting.
I 60 megapixels. Yeah, I shoot at 60 megapixels. I thought you meant the
Oh,
ISO.
yeah. So
I
yeah,
shoot the
no,
ISO at
64 is
64.
great. It
Yeah.
allows us to do some
But I do
faster shutter
say
speed.
shoot the 60 megapixel files. I've only had it for a month. So
Okay.
right now,
Yeah.
like, I don't take a card.
Yeah.
We talked about this. I'm shooting it strictly internal memory. I'm shooting it at 60 megapixel files. And I'm kind of just like utilizing it to its max. And then if I realize that the files are overkill or it's too much, then I may tone it down. But I was like, I'm not going to start midway if I just got this camera and haven't shot it all the way, right? So let me shoot it all the way and then decide if I need to throttle back.
And any changes in terms of lenses now that you've shot with it? Are there lenses that are reacting differently from your 240? Like what's the lenses situation?
So, the camera's like 10 grand. So unfortunately, this is the only lens I have.
Oh, you have one lens.
That's it, the 50 right now.
Well, it's not a bad thing to like master that one
No,
and then, evolve
it's
to
not,
other
but I
ones.
have a SL with the 24 to 70. So if I ever like want to do projects, like I'm trying to work on a project right now, that I'll take that camera, right? So I'm
Yeah.
not strictly dependent on the M. The M is more of like my quote unquote street photography. Go out every day, coffee shop, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing like a body of work, I have no quorums against taking the SL
The big
and
guy with
and
the
the
big
lens, the
zoom.
bigger lens, right? Because I'm working on something, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be moving around too much. It's probably going to be in a house or wherever. In my situation, a skate park or something. So
Yeah. The
yeah,
the, the original SL?
yeah, the original SL,
Still
correct.
a very good camera, beautiful sensor, and that
Mhm.
back then they had probably the best viewfinder with the EVF in there.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah. It was just like so bright versus, that's another 20, what is it, 2017 camera?
Yeah,
I
I
want to
don't
say
know.
something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's enough of gear talk. I think we've covered. This is a show
Here's
about the.
something I think you would
Okay.
like
Yeah.
because it deals with the storytelling aspect and because of I know your background. Another thing that I've came kind of come to terms with, and this may help some listeners, is I know you're a musician,
Yeah.
right? And I've been listening to like I've really been like reading a lot and listening to a lot of music. I've really also changed my input, right? What I'm taking in. And in listening to music, what I realize is like most of the stuff that resonates for me are songs or music that was like the person, male or female, whoever's singing, is kind of like pouring their heart out or talking about something, right?
Yeah.
Where like it's like, okay, like in music, the things that are more impactful for me are coming from somewhere from the artist.
Mm,
So I've really tried to carry that into the photography now, where it's like, okay, it's almost kind of in the same lines of the projects, right? Like if I want, I feel like my images are going to be more or going to be stronger and more impactful if they're truly coming from somewhere within myself, right? I
yeah.
don't know if that makes sense. I don't want to say vulnerability because I know that's get thrown around a lot, but it's kind of like that, you
No,
know?
but I honestly, it goes back to the why question that we when
Mhm.
we started the podcast. There's a reason why you're doing it, and something that makes you. I mean, for me, photography can be a thing that you do daily or weekly or monthly, but at the end of the day, it's something that can even be therapy. Like I'm not kidding. Like this is the most powerful stuff. Like when I feel that I'm not feeling well, and I've been going through a rough phase. You mean you and I have been discussing on
Well,
Instagram
yeah.
about that, but every time I'm out with my camera, the world that surrounds me feels different. And to your
Mhm.
point, if you're putting your heart into something and you're seeing some result, because it's not just shouting out in the
Yeah.
wild and then hoping that somebody will reply, you're actually looking at you capturing a fraction of a second of something that will never come back. That's powerful stuff. And if you can, to your point, create something that actually is more than a single frame that you appreciate, that actually tells a bigger story, that becomes a body of work that gets you into conversations like we're having today, or that you're having with Phil Penman and other people. That is how powerful putting your heart into something is. It's not necessarily about the initial reason why you started it, but it becomes something that you want to, or that can help you go through life. Like I know this is getting a bit deep, but I mean, you've
Yeah.
had some experiences in the past. I mean, I don't want
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
bring the military background, but
Yeah,
it's on your
for
website, so
sure.
it's a public
It's on the
thing.
website,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So it's a public thing, and you've seen
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm
I've
sure.
tried to put that in the forefront
Yeah.
now.
Well, I mean,
I've
that's
always
you,
kept it, I've always shelved it.
but you I'm sure, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure that it's it's part of therapy to be able to talk about
Yeah,
it
yeah.
in a way that's not just talking about it. It's
Mhm.
using it as to fuel your creativity, to fuel your healing of something that
Yeah.
happened in the past. So again, I don't want to get too deep, but I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah, for
something
sure.
that a lot of our listeners will resonate with. Photography is not just about posting images online. That's my point. It's about it
Yeah.
can actually help you heal. It can actually help you go through difficult times. It can actually bring you. I mean, I've had conversations with my mentors, including Phil Penman, and I, if it wasn't for photography, I would have never meet anybody
Yeah,
in
I
this
know for
space.
real.
Yeah,
Yeah. I've
yeah,
met some of the like yourself, right? I mean our paths would have probably never crossed.
yeah,
A lot of the people that I generally have conversations with, I met with the stupid camera, right?
yep.
So it's like it's crazy, yeah.
I think it was
And
yeah.
not to drag this out, but along the lines of what you're saying and us being extroverts, what I also realize is if I'm out shooting, right? Because it could be a solemn, lonely process, right? Whenever because we get our fuel from people, right? So whenever I'm out shooting and I'm feeling like, I'm like getting shots or whatever, whatever, and I can feel like I'm depleting, this is my new mantra. That's when I like do the portraits. Because I know I get my energy from the people. So
Yeah.
like when I'm like shooting for like an hour or two and I'm just like walking the streets, walking the streets, walking the streets, I'm like, okay, like the first person I see that like intrigues me, we're stopping, we're talking, I'm shooting. Like, and that'll
Mm.
that'll bring me back up. And I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's been working
It
for me.
totally does, my friend.
Yeah.
This is you listening to your body, to your mind, to your heart, and doing something about it. I've again been doing a lot of work on myself lately, and those signs that your body and your mind and your heart sends you daily and weekly, it's easier to avoid addressing them. It's easier to not listen to them.
Oh, for sure.
But if you start listening to them and you start acting on them, and we're doing it in various ways, it could be through the camera, through music, through just having a walk or connecting with a friend. That is how you get through
Yeah.
stuff in life. And again, it might sound a bit cliche, but it's cliche for a reason. It's because it's true. When if you have an
Yeah.
intersection between passion, what you're good at, and being able to make a living out of it, that's even better. It's not necessary, but if you can make a living out of it, wow, this is.
Yeah.
I think this is what life is all about. At the end of the
Yeah.
day.
I think there's a certain maturity to photography in my own life, right? Like, and I see it in, looking out from the outside in to like how a lot of the, especially threads, like it's so bad people can
Yeah.
be, right? And I
Hmm.
think it's because a lot of people have excelled very quickly because of social media, right? It allows people to get out in the forefront faster. But I think time in whatever space eventually just mature in it, right? And I think where I am is just a reflection of my time spent in it and the maturity that I think I'm growing in photography, right?
Mm.
So I think if someone's listening and they're just like, oh, whatever, that sounds like too woo woo or whatever, maybe you're just not there, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that this is a place you need to be, but I you know some people may be at the crossroads of where we're at, or you know maybe really close and it'll resonate with them, but I think it's just time, with everything. It just takes time. Like you just got to put a lot of time into it and it'll evolve naturally, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'm so aligned with you on that one. And to your point, you don't have to get there or to be there, but there is a point where you feel that it's not about instant gratification. It's not about feeling good about the last shoot. Of course, if you
Yeah.
did, good for you. But it's more the long run stuff. It's more the hey, I'm putting in 10,000 hours plus to basically at the end of the day feel a certain way and be accomplished in a certain way that's very different than the instant gratification that we get through threads and Instagram and social media, which
Mhm.
actually I will say this, social media has effed up our minds. Like we're so addicted to dopamine hits through any of those apps, you can name any of them,
Yeah.
that it literally changed the way we see art. And I am thankful for social media because, again, all those connections that we have, you and I, and a thousand other
Yeah.
people that I would have never met. But I'm also fearful sometimes about the way they're designed to get us back and to interact quickly and to consume ads and so on and so forth. Which leads me to a last point about social media. I'm interested in a new app that got just released a couple of days ago publicly. I was a beta tester on the Photo app, Photo app, and they're trying to do something completely different or to basically mimic how the social media platforms started back then.
Mhm.
But think about Flickr and all these platforms
Yeah.
that were not ad driven, that were mostly free or subscription driven. And yes, it's another subscription, but there's always a free tier. But again, the goal is to try to remove that dopamine hit that we're so used to with the quote unquote traditional platforms like Instagram and so on. So my question to you is, what's your view on social media in 2025? You're pretty active on it. We're all active on it. But are
Yeah.
you
You have to.
planning on only like literally doubling down, or what's your view on it?
So I'm using social media. I am doubling down, and I think you kind of alluded to it when we first talked about it. You're like, oh, I've seen a lot of the stuff you're doing, which is good for me to see that it's kind of getting out there. I am doubling down, but more of the as good as you are, if no one sees it, then no one sees it, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just using it for the purpose of trying to get my work out there, right? Nothing more than that. Just it's an outlet and a mechanism to get my work in front of as many people as I can. I think the one social media that I kind of gravitated towards, and you may have seen it, is actually has nothing to do with images unless I choose to put one on, which is Substack.
Yes. Love
So
Substack.
I have really gone over there. And what's funny is my Substack has nothing to do with photography, really.
Huh.
I've kind of leaned into other stuff. And it's more what I realized there is that people aren't going to follow you or subscribe to your stuff unless they truly have a authentic interest in what you're doing
Yeah.
because it takes effort to read all that stuff, right? So, and I think because of that, the audience tends to be a little more genuine.
Mm.
So I've gravitated towards that for more of like genuine feedback and a
Yeah.
way to really put creativity out. I'm just looking at Instagram and photo and all that stuff. It's just put stuff out, put stuff out. LinkedIn is probably really good for like the business aspect and because you can type in marketing director at Sony or
Yep.
marketing whatever, like you could find these people
Yeah.
because it's on their titles, right? So like if you really want to look for stuff and you're wondering how it works, LinkedIn is probably the magic, right? But Substack is where I'm really just writing and being more of like more creative, I think.
Yeah. I truly believe that the future, and again, those platforms, Instagram, Facebook, they will always be there. I mean, who knows? Maybe some of them will vanish, but there will always be like a connection type platform that allows people to see what their friends are up to, but also watch ads, which is the world we live in. But the one thing I'll say is that as we move towards 2025 and beyond, I think there'll be more and more people, as you described, interested in supporting creatives in a different way than just liking their stuff on Instagram or buying a preset. I think people will start paying directly. And this is how Patreon was so forward thinking back then because they kind of created that economy.
Yeah.
But now there's multiple other ways that you can not only communicate with a very interested audience, but ultimately have people support your work in, again, various ways, not just buying a print or a preset, but also maybe subscribing on the paid version of your Substack, as you just mentioned. And I know you're not doing it for the money or to get paid, because if your only revenue source is Substack, good luck buying a
That's
like a
$5 a
camera.
month.
Exactly. but it's the act of supporting a creator directly, even though Substack might take a cut, I'm assuming. that I think will be a behavior that we'll see more and more and more. YouTube added some features on that front too, where you can support the creator
Oh
directly.
yeah.
Instagram is trying to do that. So
Mhm.
that trend, I think it's here to stay, because people understand that if they just consume and without giving back to the creators won't make it. Like creators won't be
Yeah.
able to share more work moving forward that people like. So anyways, it's a bit of an ethical debate. And if you throw in AI in there, I mean, some people might be like, hey, what's the value of reading anything anymore, because ChatGPT can do all the work for us. They can write some Substack article and based on best
For sure.
practices about photography or whatever the topic. So I think there's a quest and a world where people are willing to say, hey, I want to hear from that person because they're adding value to my life. I want to support them directly. So I think you're doing the right thing by going outside of the quote unquote traditional. I guess we can say that now
Yeah.
that it's been 20 years on socials, the traditional media like that, the Instagram and the Facebook. And again, I know you're on there and you're using it,
Yep.
but differently.
Hap-
Differently.
Yeah. But I also realized, and this sounds so stupid, but I mean, I'm sure someone else is on the same planes, is s- Instagram specifically, breaking down that it's social media,
Yeah.
and actually, I've actually made really, really a lot of effort into just, I sat down, I was just like, well, wait a minute, like, there's so many people I follow, there's so many people I kind of engage with, but I never really engage with, right? So I've really made a conscious effort, as in really talking to people through, whether it's the comments or DMing them on the side, but really making it social, like
Yeah.
really engaging in the social media world. And to tell you the truth, maybe that's a cheat code, but that is paying more dividends than anything I've ever done on social media.
There you go, kids. You have it. You heard it from John's mouth directly. This is how you make the most out of Instagram. If it works for you.
I mean, I don't know. I think so. And it's not to say that I'm doing it ingenuously. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like it took me a while to like really sit there and be like, like sure, I could like your stuff, but like to really, and it's helped me narrow down the people even I follow, because I'm like, okay, like I could follow that person because whoever they are, but their work doesn't really resonate with anything I'm doing, right? So it's like, so when I started to really give, thoughtful feedback or comments or criticism, not criticism, because I would never criticize anyone, but it's more of like engaging comments. I realized that I would go to someone's thing who I've been following forever and see a picture and be like, well, like, I don't know, like it's hard for me to engage. So then I'm just like, wait a minute, let me look at everything. And I'm just like, oh, I don't even know why I'm following them. Like,
Mm,
like, so it's helped me in that sense too, of like, okay, now I'm really following the people that I want to aspire to be, or their work really resonates with me, or like, it's helped fine tune all of that. And I think once you start, like, this is part of my own maturity as a photographer, I think that helps narrow down my focus, right?
yeah.
So I think that has really helped me a lot, a lot.
John, I think the theme of this podcast is that we've matured over the past year and a half so much in our craft.
Yeah,
We're no
I think
longer
so. I
these
think so. Yeah.
crazy
Naturally, I would hope so.
crazy photographers running around with their cameras just to get that image. But John, it's been a real pleasure having you back again on the podcast.
Likewise, buddy.
What is up? What is up next for you, man? And where can people follow the next endeavor?
Just follow Instagram. I try to put stories and stuff out that you can just, link to my website or Substack or whatever. I'm constantly using that to feed everybody. So if you're interested in anything I'm doing, just go there.
Will do, my friend. Again, thank you so much for joining today. It's been very inspirational. If people want to share this podcast, they can. It's easy, guys. They can go to Spotify, Apple, Amazon, whatever the podcast player you have, and just share this episode. And if you want to give us a 5-star review, if you enjoyed the conversation, please do so. It helps spread the word out about more creative conversations that are coming up. On that note, Thank you so much, John, and see you next time.